Hey everyone, I'm Mary. I'm president and founder of the Journey Towards Healthy Living.
And my name's Tess, and I'm one of the committee members for outreach on Journal Towards Healthy Living. And today we are back with another podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a bit of just some personal testimonies on and hopefully offering our advice on how to get yourself out of a difficult place in your life.
Yeah, so I guess we should just delve right into it. I can start the topic off with depression. So I feel like the idea of depression is talked about a lot, but no one really looks at the side effects of it. So I know someone who had really bad depression, and one thing that she told me about was the fact that she had memory loss associated with her years-long depression. So we're talking about the inability to recall certain things, like forgetting where you put the key, even though it's usually in that one spot. Um, Unable to focus in class, unable to recall details, watching a lecture and then finishing it and not recalling a single thing. Um, so obviously, depression is a very real topic, and more particularly, the idea of memory loss doesn't get talked about, um, especially in academia. Could you imagine like having this sort of an issue and trying to conduct your studies and get through 4 years plus even of schooling? It's just so difficult. Like, Tess, what do you think?
I mean, I've never heard of memory loss as a side effect of depression. Like you have the typical things like you can easily relapse. It's hard to recover from, you're going to need to stay on medication if you want to stay functional in society, but I've never heard about memory loss. Like I feel like if there is studies on it, it's definitely been very limited and not heavily researched because I definitely haven't found any on it. But why do you think it is that some people who suffer from depression also suffer from memory loss? Like, what do you think the correlation is?
I'm obviously like no doctor, so like whatever I'm saying is just my personal like understanding of it. But I feel like transitioning into that very dark place that you may find yourself unable to get out of for weeks or months at a time, your mind just gets stuck in this slump. And especially if you're trying to escape some external trauma, for example, there's some people who are bothering you on the outside, you may have family problems, you're just constantly being stuck in that hazy mindset that it totally makes sense that you're not absorbing anything to in relation to the life that you're actually in, like in that mindset you're not really taking in anything that's going on around you.
So basically, the side effect is because you're trying to escape external trauma. It's basically like your mind's coping mechanism to the depression that you're facing.
I mean, it doesn't always have to be trauma, like, depression is caused by so many things, but like the people that I know and a little bit of my personal experience, it was external factors, typically, unfortunately, other people who were often the cause of depression, um, and resorting to your mind's dark corners to escape what's going on the outside is the coping mechanism many of us use, especially those who struggle with depression.
That sounds really, really difficult to deal with. I mean, I just like the fact that depression to begin with it's not the person's fault at all. It's an imbalance of hormones in your brain, and the fact that you also and it's sometimes it can even just be caused by trauma or other people that again are just not your fault. They're just the people you interact with, and the fact that you have to pay this extra consequence to your already difficult life is just it blows my mind. That's crazy. I mean, do you think that the memory loss only happens, or in your experience with your friend, do you have they told you that the memory loss has gone away after the depressive episode, or does it persist? Is this a permanent thing that comes?
Definitely. Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but it is definitely not something that goes away easily. Thank you for bringing this up because I actually wanted to mention that there are no cure. There's nothing to help you out of this. It's like your mind is in this state, and hopefully someday you just get better enough that it can move past it because the human brain is an amazing thing. It's able to bring itself out and put itself into situations. Sometimes your brain can naturally move past this. But I know of people who are still struggling with this even when the event that triggered the depression happened years prior. Like we're talking 3, 4 years prior, and they're still struggling with that memory aspect. It tends to get worse later on, just because nothing bad really has immediate effect for the most part. You tend to see it later on, and this is one of the things.
So, what are some of the things that come with memory loss? Like you said, for example, you forget where you left your keys. Like, can it affect you academically as well?
Definitely. So, like I mentioned before, um, like you're watching a lecture, you're finishing that lecture, and you can't recall a single thing, or it doesn't have to be like in that strict criteria. It could also be like you're just having difficulty remembering. It doesn't have to be that you can't recall anything, but it's just the fact that normal people should be or are able to remember like small bits of information from the lecture, but then these individuals are having difficulty in like connecting the dots, absorbing it. It's mostly like it's coming from one ear and going out the other. I think that describes it best.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So, I mean, I feel like these memory problems, because like it obviously the severity depends from person to person, but if you have really bad memory loss, I feel like that, since that's making your life so much harder, it could almost trigger the person to go back into a depressive episode. Like, I mean, knowing the type of person I am, if I fall behind too hard academically, like, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that could, if I had depressive tendencies, I could definitely see myself falling back into that. So it's kind of like this weird positive feedback loop between like having a depressive episode, and then from that subsequently it comes with memory issues, and then those memory issues can make you fall back into that episode. So it's very difficult to escape, but I know it can be done at the same time, whether or not you're suffering from memory issues or not. So like from the experience that your friend has told you, what are some things that they have done to get themselves out of this difficult place in their lives?
Yeah. Obviously, the first is acknowledging what's going on. There's only so much you can do when you're in denial. So, taking the time to reflect on your current situation. Maybe I know personally, I resorted to writing out my feelings. So when I didn't have anyone to turn to, and that's typically what's seen with depressive individuals, I resorted to paper and pencil or pen, whatever. And I was just writing it all out, like putting what I couldn't untangle in my mind onto paper where it was a bit more tangible and understandable. I think, secondly, there's only so much you can do yourself. So seeking professional help, going to trusted adults and loved ones in your life is key. And it's important to have a support system. That's the biggest part of it. If you have people that are constantly belittling your inability to participate academically or to get things done because you just can't remember them, I mean, imagine how much progress can be made if you're already suffering and suffering like consequences because of that suffrage, and on top of that having a lack of support. There's not much that can be done from that point on. So
Absolutely. I completely agree with the support system. Like, you need a variety of people, especially when you're suffering, like when you're in the midst of like a depressive episode. You need your friends that can distract you and take your mind, well, not take your mind off of it, but just have fun with you so that at least for the moment you can sort of forget about it. And alongside that, you need some people who have more expertise. So that can be like a team of therapists or just like having your parents by your side, just filling them in on what's going on in your life. And I think more than anything, it's important that you find people who genuinely care because, right? Because like you said, like if you have people who are just constantly belittling you and like don't really take the time to like understand how you're feeling, it's just going to make everything worse. And it's easier said than done. I mean, not everyone is so to have, just like a team of like unconditionally loving people towards you. I think, that just comes with like time and I guess like just experience and knowing like who someone's real friends and loved ones should be, what should consist of.
Yeah. It's tough. I think it's important to mention that McMaster has a mental health program currently. If you are in a position where you can't pay for the help or go to a therapist, because unfortunately therapists are expensive in Canada. It's almost like a luxury when it shouldn't be. It should be basic health care.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. McMaster actually has a program. It's currently on a wait list as far as I know. But obviously be proactive. If you have been listening to our previous podcast, especially with Dr. Rachel Finitry, Professor Rachel Finitry, it's important to understand the idea of being proactive with your mental health, not reactive. So don't let it get so bad that you're in a position where you need the help but can't find it because of long wait times and stuff. Instead, when you feel yourself slipping slowly, find the help, have it there in case you need it. Establish these connections so that they're there when you really, really need it.
I think that's been really well said. Yeah, I think intervention, like quick intervention, is key, and that's like the key to tackling a lot of mental health issues too. Like, I think the good thing about having a therapist too is that once you establish one that you trust, and again, easier said than done, you might have to go through multiple to just find one that you can really connect to and one that can really, really understand your problems. I think that once you have them, you can sort of like, if you're feeling like you don't need them for a period of time, that's totally fine. And then during a time that is more difficult for you and feeling like you need to talk to someone, you can go right back to them. But it's really nice. It's really nice that McMaster is taking mental health seriously. And they have that program. I think it's really, really important, especially for people who can't afford it on their own. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that sort of wraps up our topic of depression. There are other things that we could talk about in this podcast. Tess, do you want to lead us on this one?
Yeah, sure. So like, aside from depression, I think that another mental health issue that's sort of, it's very, very common, but I feel like it sort of goes a little bit untalked about is having general anxiety disorder and living with it. I feel like because it's such a common thing, it's not really considered to be a mental illness in itself. If you tell someone, oh, I have anxiety, the response would typically be like, who doesn't? And I mean, they're right. It's true. But I feel like it can still really, really affect you in a lot of ways. My personal experience with anxiety is sort of misconstruing how people perceive me. And that can create a lot of anxiety. That can take a toll on everything, because if I'm just thinking about, well, what are they thinking of me? What do they think I'm doing? Like I'm constantly focusing on that rather than like things in my own life, and like I just become completely disorganized and out of hand, and that that really affects me personally.
Tess, could I interject?
Yes, please.
So, do you mind talking about like what you or some people that you know to have GAD or generalized anxiety disorder, what the misconceptions regarding people perceiving them could be? What would that look like?
Sure, yeah. So if I can just give you an example. So I mean, this is just like a very simple example, but the one that, you know, comes off the top of my head is if I'm in a crowd of people and I'm standing there alone. I guess maybe the first thing that would come to my head is people like wondering, oh, why is she alone? Is she like a mean person? Is she difficult to be around? Does she have no friends? Does no one want to be around her? And when I think, like, when I observe the people around me, and if I were to see people talking to each other quietly or snickering, I'm like, it's kind of a narcissistic trait, but the immediate assumption is I'm thinking that they're talking about me, like right off the bat. And it's just it's painful, and I feel like feeling like everyone's attention is constantly on me all at once. It kind of leads me to do things that I would regret doing later. Like I remember this one time I was standing in a lecture hall after class, and I was alone because I didn't have any friends in that class. And I saw this group of girls that were sort of laughing and pointing in my direction. And I was convinced that they were laughing at me for whatever reason. But so what I ended up doing was, and this is like completely embarrassing. I wanted to know for sure if they were in fact like talking about me. So I walked up really close to them and just like basically tried to listen in on what they were saying. And in turn, they noticed that, and then they sort of got like, not weirded out, but they were like, well, why did you just like walk up closer to us? Like for what reason? Like I feel like I wasn't doing anything weird to begin with, but my assumptions in my brain led, like the things that I was thinking in my head led me to do something that was in fact actually strange to them. And it turns out they were laughing at a slide on the that the professor left up previously, and it was completely, it had nothing to do with me. It had something to do with like something the professor said in a slide that was posted before class ended. So that was a pretty embarrassing experience for me, for sure. But
you couldn't help it, really.
I really couldn't. And it's just like you said, the mind is such a powerful tool, and like when it convinces you that something is true, you believe it.
Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know like you got really personal there. So in relation to our topic of today, you know, getting yourself out of a dark place, when you're in that mindset, how are you able to like pull yourself out of it? Do you have mechanisms that you've like gone over and know that they work for you and could maybe share with our listeners?
Yeah. So I think maybe the main thing to tackling this this generalized anxiety disorder, I think it's again, it's hard to do, but I feel like when you're already in a state of anxiety and you've been in that state for a long time, it's very easy to sort of redo those negative actions, to sort of keep having those negative thoughts and those unwanted thoughts. So I think that the key to tackling this is to sort of relieve yourself of stress in general, so that in the moment you are feeling more calm, more assured, and you're able to better find a solution to your problem. So things that I like to do is I like to find things that de-stress me in life. So while I'm living away from home and I don't really have the comfort of like talking to my parents who I love and trust very much, I like to go on walks or on runs, and that really soothes my mind. It gives me mental clarity. It lets me hash out situations in my head that I don't really want there anymore, and it sort of just lets me play them out, get it out of my system, and then when I come back from my run, I'm in a better state. I can do my work, I can hang out with friends with nothing on my mind but like focusing on them solely. I think definitely one of the main things that you can do for yourself is to find something that that makes you happy and that gives you mental clarity. So for me, that's going on walks or runs and staying active. For other people, that could be doing artwork, reading a book. Some people really enjoy cleaning. They find it very therapeutic, and it's productive as well. So I wish I liked cleaning.
I mean, running is good. It's definitely very good for your health and your
Definitely.
cardiovascular health in particular. So it's
Yeah,
definitely a healthy coping mechanism.
for sure. No, I enjoy that. And yeah, and I think that as long as, and it also sort of gives you some structure to the day. So if you spend an hour running, reading a book, doing some art, it sort of helps with the whole routine of your day. And I think that that also provides some comfort and structure to your life that you can, that sort of just makes you feel better, more at ease, helps you deal with situations later that come up. So yeah, I would say that would be my main piece of advice to someone who's suffering from GAD or related issues.
Thank you. Just because we have a few more minutes left, for someone that is struggling with GAD, there's often like you mentioned, finding a therapist to click with is often difficult and time consuming, but obviously worth it in the long run. Do you have any word of advice for people with GAD who are struggling to see the value of therapy? Or it doesn't necessarily have to be therapy, but other interventions that are known to help with GAD?
So the thing about GAD is, I mean, therapy and for any disorder really, like sometimes therapy just isn't for everyone. Sometimes it just doesn't work for everyone. Sometimes therapy is not the best thing for you, and other times it's more of a chemical imbalance, so medication is needed and that's sufficient to help you. But a lot of times it's the combined use of therapy and medication that is really beneficial to most people. So I would say for people who are reluctant to find therapy, I think I think that the value in it is that if you don't have anyone in your circle or your support system that you genuinely trust enough with like your deepest, darkest thoughts, if you feel like you're going to be judged by them, that's not the case with a therapist. Like they've heard the worst of it, and they are trained to not only listen to you judgment free, but to also sort of provide some advice to you. And sometimes it's actually really good advice. I mean, sometimes it's not. What can we do? We're all human. But sometimes if you find a therapist that you actually really, really connect with, they are able to help you find some solutions and some clarity to the things that you're facing. And that's not often the case for people in your support system. Like, I know for me, like, I love my family and I love my friends dearly, but sometimes I just need an unbiased opinion on what to do. And I think therapy can really do that for you. So that's definitely one of the benefits of therapy. But like I said, it's not for everyone. And for some people, it just doesn't work. So I think you have to find what works for you. But I definitely would, if you are struggling with a mental health issue and you are finding yourself in a hard, difficult position, I would definitely suggest giving therapy a try.
Definitely.
And
Definitely. And like you mentioned, like the loved ones in our circle are only able to do so much. I mean, they haven't had that professional training, like you mentioned, to be non-judgmental and to actually be a good listener. For example, I have this one class called Health Sci 3 SO3, and in it we're learning to be listeners, not solution providers, which a lot of us in the medical, pre-med, whatever community, we sort of always jump to solutions because we want to help. But actually, just being there and listening and asking guiding questions to help the person get their story out is much more effective in that time being. And some people aren't looking for solutions. Some people just want you to listen and acknowledge their story. So there are many, many benefits associated with therapy. But like you said, it doesn't have to be the only solution, and it certainly isn't for everyone.
Exactly. Yeah. Usually, like I said, it's usually a combination of medication and therapy that really does help most people. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people who have support systems. They have, like, despite how much they love their support system, they find it difficult to not inevitably feel a little bit judged by them. And I mean, it's understandable. I mean, if you are telling one of your family members a very negative thought that you have that is very taboo and just not societally accepted, I mean, it's sort of expected that your family member might judge you and think a little bit differently of you. So just being able to save that for a therapist and having them just purely listen to you without judgment, it just seems beneficial to me.
Yes.
And do you think that therapy helps with people, people suffering with depression, or does that sort of depend as well?
Honestly, um, it's certainly possible that you're able to do it yourself and get yourself out of that situation and that dark mindset. But, therapy wouldn't be around if it didn't work. I mean, therapy is an ancient practice. If it wasn't helping people, it would have long died out. But the fact that we've now developed medications and we now have more trained personnel in therapy, it's proven that it works. So it goes back to the individual. Are you at a point where you think you can open up now that you've suffered the worst of it? I mean, at that point, some people may see therapy and being open not the worst thing ever. Sometimes they really need to get it out of their system and have someone listen to them. But for others, they may not be at that point yet, or they are, but it just isn't compatible with their personality. So it's definitely a spectrum. It looks like we're running low on time here. So do we have any closing remarks? Anything to say?
I think maybe just summarizing what we said that we went over during this podcast. So, I mean, there are multiple mental health issues that are so common amongst people, especially university students, and it's becoming especially more prominent and pronounced during COVID. So, a couple of suggestions that we have talked about during this podcast that really help people get themselves getting out of a hard space is to one, surround yourself by a proper support system, whether that be your friends, your family, therapists, doctors. It's good to have a variety of those people because they're each able to help you with a different aspect of your mental health issue. Another thing is to find mental clarity in things that you enjoy doing. So whether that's running, walking, doing artwork, reading, cleaning, all of those can be used for people to find comfort in and to help them later in their lives when they're dealing with stressful situations. And those are just a couple of things that we talked about during our podcast that people, it's a lot easier said than done, but if they're used correctly, then they can really be beneficial for people trying to get themselves out of a dark situation. So I think that's all the time that we have. Miriam, it was a pleasure once again doing this podcast with you.
Same as well. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think we touched on many important points, and we'll be back next month.
It starts with a look, all that it took.